No, hey, Daniel, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much. And we're gonna have a little fun today. We have a great topic that has ramifications government wide. And so let's jump into it. So we're going to talk about category management today. And this is a topic um, that you're going to find very, very deep. There's a lot of information here. I'm going to keep it at a high level to make it as palatable as possible. The program that we're using for this, the container that we use to support the fine print series, is what we call Do You Know Government Contracting, or DYK GovCon. And this is our introductory series where we talk about topics, take a single topic, beat it up a bit just to help folks get some information, understand what it's all about so they can use it to start making decisions about, how it impacts them and how they should leverage this going forward in the federal sector. One of the things that I'll put up here for everyone also is, if my clicker works, there we go, is my contact information. I am all over the place in a good way, and that is phone, email. Our website is robust, a lot of great information. And if you're on the new Clubhouse app, you can follow me there or come into the club. We have GovCon Club as a clubhouse on Clubhouse. And so we have a lot of things that we do there, about 3 programs a week, talking on different topics. You can jump on if you're in Clubhouse, follow us, join the GovCon Club, and stay in touch with some of the other information we do. Very similar to this. We actually have a audio version of DYK GovCon that we do every Monday at 4:15 on Clubhouse. And let me just figure out why. There we go. All right, so one of the things that I like to do before each session, because we have a great topic that's going to give you some good information, and as a business owner, business developer, capture guy from way back, this is my 34th year in the business, I've learned over time that it takes more than just being good at business development, the art of finding and winning opportunities. You have to round that out with other information that will also influence how you do business. And so this is kind of our homage to my legal friends, the lawyers of government contracting, and specifically the folks over at Co-Prince Law, whose information I'm using to share with you right now. If you've never read their blog before, it's called Small GovCon, www.smallgovcon.com. Free information, great articles, and here's a few of them. So one of the recent changes that has come about is to the Mentor Protege program for SBA. And not only the Mentor Protege program, but also joint ventures and how that works together. And so one of the things that the folks at Co-Prince Law brought to our attention is that the template on SBA's website for executing a joint venture agreement is not exactly current with the new regulations. So I invite you, if you've ever thought about doing a joint venture, go check this article out first, just to save yourself some time and aggravation. This is an interesting one. So the General Accountability Office, who basically weighs in on government-wide protests and other issues, recently made a decision that said very specifically that past performance isn't always required as an evaluation factor. Now, this is interesting because coming into federal contracting, the one thing you'll hear is, if you're brand new, just go ahead and just select to be a sub, because if you don't have past performance, you're never going to get in the door. Well, guess what? GAO is saying differently. So this is one I would tell you to keep an eye on, especially if you are newer to federal contracting. The Office of Hearings and Appeals for SBA recently told an area office that teams formed under a prime subcontractor relationship are measured differently than joint ventures. And what that means is there's different rules that apply. under things like subcontracting. There's a term you'll hear sometimes called ostensible subcontractor. It's something that ties into what's called affiliation. If too much of your work as a small business is tied to an other than small company, the government can determine that you are affiliated with that organization by virtue of having too much dependency on them, and it can cost you your small business status. So what OHA is saying is that only applies to prime subcontractor teams. Joint ventures have an exception to that rule, and that's, again, something else you ought to pay attention to just to get updated. If your company is or is thinking about participating in the HUBZone program, this is the socioeconomic program for companies and its employees that are based in what's called a historically underutilized business zone. It's nothing to do with who you are by ethnicity or economic impact. It's all about where you're putting your company to help areas that are in need of assistance to grow. Well, the FAA has recently changed its rules to start acknowledging the HUBZone program. Now, if you're wondering why this is such a big deal, here's why. One of the things that Michelle and I talk about in our boot camp classes and others is that the fact that the government and all the agencies within it are not all created equal. Here's what I mean. Under a rule called the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulations, is where you will find the language that determines what agencies should do to include small business. It's called the Small Business Act, and that applies to contracting and subcontracting. Well, not everyone in the government follows the FAR. In fact, of the three branches of government, executive, judicial, and legislative, only the executive branch is bound by the FAR. But even there, not every agency in the executive branch is bound by the FAR. For example, Central Intelligence Agency, U.S. Mint, Smithsonian Institution, and FAA. Even though FAA is part of Department of Transportation, which does follow the FAR, ever since the FAA was federalized back in the Reagan administration, they have been operating under different rules, their own. So they don't have the FAR. They don't have small business requirements under the FAR the way other agencies do. But they have their own rules that look similar to it, which is why this piece about the HUBZone program is interesting. They're now updating their own rules to be able to leverage HUBZone companies. So again, if you're thinking about it and FAA is a target for you, this is good news if you are or plan to be a HUBZone company. The last one I'll talk about is that the GAO weighs in again, General Accountability Office. They're kind of like the Supreme Court of issues related to federal contracting, without actually going to the real Supreme Court. And they recently made a decision that just because a SAM registration for someone who'd been on a contract had expired, the agency can't say that they were non-responsive, which is going to be, again, going to be interesting because that's always been the case. So having said that, take a look, see which of these articles has impact on you, and use the information to your benefit. Again, you can find this all on the blog of Co-Prince Law. Their website is smallgovcon, that's SMALLGOVCON as in Nancy.com. COM as in Mike. It's not an advertising site. It's simply all of their articles and opinions about recent changes to law, protests, and so forth. It is a wealth of information. All right, hey, let's get forward now, get moving with category management. And before I, kind of flip the slide, I'll talk about it for a minute. What is category management and why does this matter to me? Why am I here today? One of the things that you need to be able to understand if you want to work with the government is the processes and the rules that are in place. And so category management is both. It is a rule and a process. It's a practice that government agencies, government agencies are using to determine how they buy stuff. Now, I want to talk high level because it's not just about buying stuff. That's the end result. It's also about planning to buy stuff. And this is kind of the definition and the difference between acquisition and procurement. Under acquisition, there are lots of moving parts that starts with, concept, design, planning, and then contracting is in there too. So acquisition is a much bigger lift than purchasing is or procurement. Procurement is literally just the act of buying stuff, which in itself is a huge deal. So I'm saying that just to kind of prepare you for what you're going to see in these next few slides to help you understand that this is not just about the government buying stuff. It's about their plans to create programs, getting congressional funding, passing acts and laws and bills to be able to get things done. In the scheme of things, that supports the overall mission of the entire US government. So if you've ever heard the term category management before, and let me backtrack. If you've ever heard the term strategic sourcing before, strategic sourcing is an initiative that is used worldwide, government and industry, commercial, private sector, public sector, you name it. And it's a way for organizations to buy better and buy smarter. It's about efficiency. One of the things about strategic sourcing that is widely scrutinized is the seemingly negative impact it has on smaller companies as opposed to larger companies. And so that'll be part of this conversation too. Now, the reason I bring strategic sourcing up is because that's where category management came from. Originally, there was a strategic sourcing initiative in the government that eventually got gussied up to look more friendly, and they called it category management. And so when you think about category management is a strategic business practice that the federal government has implemented to buy smarter and more like a single enterprise. And what does that mean? Right now, you've got the US government and you've got the 3 branches and then all the agencies underneath those branches. And each of them has a level of autonomy on how they buy things. And that's how it's been done for years. The government has determined that that is not always the most efficient or cost-effective way to do things. So they're trying to centralize it more and more. Now, I'm going to tell you, this has been around since the early 2000s that they've been trying to roll this out and are still doing it. And what I'll tell you is there is resistance from within the government because it is a culture change for the US government, and not everyone is open to that change because it's a major change. But the goals of government-wide category management are for agencies to realize more savings, to achieve efficiencies in how they do business. One of the big parts of it is that it works to eliminate contract redundancies. If you look around right now, I was talking to Michelle earlier, we were looking online at different resources. And just under category management, contracts that meet the definition of the levels of category management contracts, there are 1,800 different contracts out there being used by the government, some of them as old as 2016, some of them only established in the last couple of years. And so that's 1,800, and that doesn't count all the other stuff that they're trying to reduce to make, get rid of some of the redundancy. The last goal is they want to meet the government small business goals, which it will explain why you see one of the tiers I'm going to show you that speaks directly to small business. But that's not the only place you can play, and I'll make sure I spell that out. But having said that, one of the things that I want everyone to take a look at is this slide. This slide is showing you a big picture spend of how the US government obligated money during fiscal year 2019. So that's the completed fiscal year that ended in September 30th, 2020. So that was the end of fiscal year 2019. And what you'll see there in the upper right corner is the US government spent $590 billion. So those were the obligations that we could see in a public system. It doesn't include, what's called the black spin, by the intelligence community, and it doesn't include micro purchase spin, which is like another 10, $12 billion because it doesn't get tracked in these systems. So there's dollars missing from it, but this is the big part of it. And what you're looking at, if you look at the top section, it's called the common government spend categories. There are 10 categories that are used government-wide by almost every federal agency. And they're broken down in things like facilities and construction, professional services, office management, transportation, IT, medical, and so forth. So what you're seeing here is the aggregate spend under each of those 10 categories on that top half of the page. I'm going to show you this again later and give you some more information about this, but I want to bring it to your attention now. The other part is the lower half of the page is the defense-centric spend. Here's what that means. Overall, in category management, there are 19 categories. 10 of them are for everyone in government that wants to use them. 9 of them are just for the boys and girls in DoD. And what that means is this is really only stuff that they're going to use. This is where you'll find battleships and aircraft carriers and missiles and bombs and those kinds of things, as well as other unique products and services that are really germane to the mission of the Department of Defense. And so again, you can see the breakdown in spend by category: equipment related services, sustenance, research and development, aircraft, ships, subs, and land vehicles. So they're showing you a breakdown by spending in each of these categories. Before this presentation is done, I'm going to give you even more of a breakdown to use. Now, the government, what they've done to manage category management is they've established these categories, and then they've assigned somebody from various agencies. You'll see here DHS, GSA, DOD, VA, and others. And these are the category managers. These are the folks who are the overall program manager for what happens inside those respective categories. So that's the tippy top, short of going to the White House when you look at responsibility. But again, it just shows you the breakdown and by agency, who is managing these. And it makes complete sense because VA for medical is huge. There are other agencies that do a lot of medical stuff like HHS and so forth, but a lot of theirs is research and policy. VA is clinical in a lot of areas, so it makes a lot of sense for them to have that category as one that they own. Now, if we start getting into some of the weeds just a bit, there's a term you're going to get familiar with under category management. And again, this is a government-wide initiative. So everyone's involved, even DoD, although DoD has its own initiative called Better Buying Power that's been around since 2010, but they're also adopting some of the elements of category management as well. But spend under management, or SUM, is a term you're going to see me talk about a lot here. And it's something that you don't need to commit to memory, just recognize it when you see it. And what it basically says is that an organization is complying with SUM, spend under management, or spending under category management is really what it comes down to. Because they're using the principles established under category management to make better, smarter decisions, which saves time and money for their agency. And what they've done is they've created tiers underneath each of these under SUM that breaks down what kind of spending and what kind of activities happen. So what you have first is the highest tier. It's called Tier 3, also known as BIC, B-I-C, for best-in-class solutions. And what this looks like is, anytime an agency spends money on a BIC contract, think the IT-70 GSA schedule, really just hardware and software, not services, or contracts like GSA Alliant or GSA Oasis, or HCATS, Human Capital and Training Solutions. these are all of the mechanisms, multiple award contracts that are being used by the government that they have determined as best in class. And there's a criteria for that of how they get this designation because of how well they help, form the savings in time and money for the government. The next one is called Tier 2 contracts. And these are the multi-agency solutions. So where they might not be government-wide, like Alliant or Oasis, but they can be used by multiple agencies. So it might be a contract vehicle issued by DoD, but they've opened it up so that Department of Justice and DHS can use it as well. Next up is what are called the mandatory use agency-wide solutions. So these are contracts that are issued by an agency, only available to be used by that agency, but they have been deemed mandatory for the specific goods and or services being procured. The next to last one is what is known as Tier 1. These are the agency small business strategic contracts. And again, they fit the bill of being, part of the spend under management, but they're just for small business concerns. So you want to pay close attention to this one. The very last one is the one I'm going to talk about today as well. This is called Tier 0. Tier 0 may sound like a negative, but let me flip the script. This is the government-wide spend as it is done today. And so, although it doesn't align with category management, it's the style of buying the US government has been doing ever since I've been in here, and I've been doing this 34 years. So don't look at Tier 0 as a negative. Only GSA does, quite honestly. But this is how the money's being spent. And I'm going to tell you, the punchline is most of the money being spent by the government today still falls under Tier 0. This is a work in progress that GSA wants to get to. So having said that, here's a quick snapshot of some of the best-in-class solutions by category. Now, what you're looking at here, if you look at the blue headings, you'll see transportation and logistics, IT, industrial products, professional services. So find the one or ones that resonate with you, that really fits who you are. And then take a look at what you see listed there. There are some contracts here that are mandatory, like the DoD Next Gen Delivery Services, or the mandatory big for auto choice for vehicle purchasing. But then you've got others that are not. Now, one of the things I want to bring to everyone's attention is this. If you have ever heard before about GSA schedules being a required vehicle, and Michelle's probably chuckling right now as I position this, the GSA schedules used to be a mandatory vehicle. They are not. For several years, they have no longer been a required vehicle. So anytime someone tells you this, I want you to be able to tell them, I think you're incorrect, and here's why. So one of the things is, if you want to be a geek like me and Michelle and go dig into the FAR under FAR subpart 8, where the schedules live, and so do required sources of supply, you'll notice that the GSA schedule is no longer listed on that list of required vehicles. So I'm just throwing that out there for some extra knowledge. But if you scroll down this page on the left side and look under IT category, and then look at number 11, IT schedules, notice that it does not say it is a mandatory BIC. It is a BIC. It is a best-in-class vehicle, but not mandatory. The government buys in a lot of ways that are not tied to a GSA schedule. And in fact, the IT Schedule 70 accounts for less than 5% of the overall fiscal spend. And let me rephrase that. It accounts for less than 10% of the overall spend on IT spending by the US government. US government spends 80, 90 billion a year on information technology investments. The IT schedule is less than $20 billion. So it might be in that 10%-ish range, but not much more above that. So just wanted to bring that to your attention. But what you're seeing here is somewhat of a roadmap. They're telling you very specifically when an agency is going to spend money under one of these categories, these will be the first places they look. So if your company does not yet possess one of these vehicles, here's some advice. Go start making nice with some of the companies that have these vehicles so you can position yourself to get some of the business versus none of the business. All right, and I know we did an FPDS training already. There's another one coming up. We'll show you in those loosely how you can find this kind of information about the companies performing on these contracts. Now, another view I wanted to give you a snapshot of was this. If you take a look at this page, this is one of GSA's systems where you can go slice and dice information. It's called the Government-Wide Category Management Award Exploration Tool. And I'll put that link out there, Daniel, for you so you can send it out. But this is a place you can go to really get into the meat of what's going on. You can download and export and all sorts of stuff. But what I want everyone to see is this. So last fiscal year, the US government spent a lot of money on a lot of stuff. And out of that total spend, of nearly $700 billion, only $226 billion of it really fit the bill as dollars that qualify for spend under management. So basically a third of the spend was spent this way. So what that means is, again, you want to be cognizant of what this means. You want to understand the goods and services that you want to sell, how they fit into this mix. But what I'm also going to say is, don't get fixated on what's going on here, because there's plenty of opportunity outside of this as well. Yeah. Hey, Daniel, real quick, I was getting a slight echo. Am I coming through okay audio-wise?
Yeah, you're coming through. I heard it too.
Okay.
I don't know if somebody had a mic on or something. I think we're good now, though.
Sounds good. All right, thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, so gang, so here's what you're looking at. So what I've selected here, this is for fiscal year 2020. And what I have done is selected everything on here for those tiers I showed you a few minutes ago. So best in class, tier 2, tier 1, and tier 1 small business. And so that total spend of $226 billion was shared by about 20,000 companies. Now, that's a lot of companies, it's a lot of money, but being one of the old guys in this business, I'm not all that impressed. And the reason why is I've seen a lot bigger, and I still do every day. And my last slide that I show you guys will kind of point back to this. But what you're seeing is a breakdown here. The total records is how many contract actions the government, executed to get there. The unique PIIDs are the individual contracts or orders that were issued. So 700,000 unique contracts or task orders or delivery orders were issued to get to this number. And that was all conducted or performed by 19,556 companies. Now, here's that same view. And what I've done is looked at just small business. So out of that 226 billion and 19,556 companies, 54 billion, almost 55, went to small business concerns, and it was about 14,582 small business concerns. Now, again, that's a big number. It's impressive, but I'm still not terribly impressed because I still see bigger in other areas. Now, if I drill down and look at just the tier that GSA said is just for small business, it looks like this. So tier 1, the small business strategic, and small business only, it's only 2,500 companies and $2 billion. Now, again, color me completely unimpressed because we see more than this in opportunities that are much easier to get into than some of these. But again, I'm just setting the stage so you have an idea of some of the impact of what this means. And then I'm going to show you this next one. Now, this next view is going to be the same view, except it's not going to be under the sum or spend under management. This is what goes on outside of category management as of today, same fiscal year. And now what you see is this. Now I'm impressed. $57 billion, where you didn't have to work quite as hard. 64,000 small businesses got a piece of the action here. All right, I believe that comes out to somewhere a little over $1 million per company on average. I'll have to go back and do my math. But again, I like it because it's spreading the wealth quite well, because you go from only 14 or 15,000 small companies to now 64,000. I like that number better. I don't like having just an 80-20 rule type of thing. I like more to win because it keeps everyone honest and hungry. Now, on the subject of small business and category management, I do need to I told Michelle I'd be careful how I did this to let my bias not show too much. But I'm not a huge fan of category management the way it is being implemented. I think it can be done well in a way that is very inclusive of small business, but that's not the case right now. And to demonstrate this chart that I'm showing you, this is all GSA's information. I didn't create any of this. And what you're looking at is a year-over-year count of small businesses who were involved in spending under the different categories. So the left side are the 10 common categories that is government-wide. And what you'll see is, if you look at the very bottom, it started off in 2017 with 94,000 small business concerns. And then by the time we got to FY20, we had already lost about a little over 20,000 small businesses no longer being included. FY 2021 year to date, there have only been about 39,000 small businesses involved. And we're basically, third quarter, heading in there. So that's not very promising for me, which is why I always accentuate how the government buys when it's not under category management. But this is something you need to understand. If you look at the other side, under the defense-centric categories, the 9 that are there just for DoD, it's a similar thing, not quite as dramatic as it was for the common categories, but you can see we've gone from about 28,000 small businesses in 2017 to 21,020, and we've only seen about 11,000 so far this year. So the attrition has not been equal. It's more in the common categories than it is on the defense side. So again, if you're working with DoD, it's a safer bet right now than what we're seeing trending on the common categories, which is DoD, but also all of the civilian agencies. So the last thing I'll show you is this. So this is kind of how GSA touts their relationship with small business as it relates to category management. And they talk about things like there's a higher retention. Small businesses on some contracts are 20% more likely to win subsequent contracts than companies in the open market or tier 0. Okay, well, that may be true, but there are far fewer small businesses in that pool. It pays to be on a sum contract. And again, they're talking about it, you're on 4.5 times more on average. And again, that is true. It's a big pot of money with far less competition. And getting to that bar to be competitive is a heavy lift the way things are shaped right now. And then this one is this. Competition is active. Of the 9,000 plus small businesses active in some spend, nearly 50% moved up, from tier 0. Well, again, there were 14,500 companies in the small business tier spend, and there were 63, almost 64,000 that were not, and getting as much or more money. So it's, again, you guys do the math for yourselves. I'm going to tell you to look at both. Don't discount either approach, but I will tell you, don't get fixated on one more than the other, because you'll do yourself a disservice. So you need to understand more and more about what your current customers or your customers' customers are doing relative to category management, so that you are not getting caught unawares. The last thing I'm going to show you is this. So this is the government-wide spend from the last completed fiscal year, so FY 2020. So as compared to FY 19, it was almost $100 billion more in spending. And as you look at the breakdown by category, you can see the dollars into some of the different service areas that will tell you high level what they were buying as far as at the group level. So again, if you can look at this list and pick 2 or 3 of the buckets here that are relevant to you, I've got a little tip for you to consider. And this is the reason we asked Daniel to switch our next presentation to product service codes. What the government has done, both DoD and the civilian agencies, is that in the categories to assign what they are buying, they've used a classification code that is not a NAICS code. And that classification code tells you unequivocally what they are buying to a fairly granular level. That code is called a product service code. And literally, if you look at the IT bucket, for 75.6 billion, I can tell you that all the spending in that area probably happened in one of 4 groups. It happened in either group 7, which is IT products. It happened in group D, which is IT services. It happened in group R, which is professional services and management. And it happened under group U for training and education. And so when you look at this, if you drill into this, and there's a place you can go called the PSC tool. It's P Papa, S Sam, C Charlie, T Thomas, O Ocean, O Ocean, L Lima, .U uniform, S Sierra, psctool.us. What you will see is a rendition of what I'm showing you here without the dollars, but it shows all the categories and the product service codes assigned to each of those categories. If you pay attention to what you're seeing and use that information to help you structure your searches for opportunities, you have already cut off an immense amount of time that most others spend filtering through business opportunities, because the PSC code doesn't care about NAICS codes. All right, it's used in every record just like a NAICS code is, but it's not dependent on a NAICS code. So what you'll see is PSC codes popping up in 20, 40, 80 different NAICS codes. And it doesn't matter, because all the NAICS code tells you is what industry the government determined was needed to conduct this project, and then what the applicable small business size standard is. As long as you fit in the size standard, you don't care what the NAICS code is. Unless you're an 8A, and that's the only one that's different, because your NAICS code is assigned by SBA because they guarantee your work. So that's everything I've got for you folks today. Hopefully there was something useful in here for you. I am happy to hang out and answer any questions you might have.